Tanya Washington, a professor of law at Georgia State University College of Law. So, Tanya, we were talking about the case which the jury have to decide, and the key factor is whether they believe that Derek Chauvin was, his actions were a causal factor in the death of George Floyd. And by that we mean the fact that he was kneeling on his neck for 9.5 minutes. Just talk us through what kind of things the jury will have been deliberating about before they reach their verdict.
So 12 pages of jury instructions is significant. That's like one of my law school exams. They have been schooled in the nuances of criminal law, but the essential question is whether Officer Chauvin's use of force was unreasonable and whether it was a substantial factor in causing Mr. Floyd's death. And so, you know, the prosecution asked the jury in its closing remarks to use common sense. What is striking about this case is that all of us, including the jurors, have seen and witnessed his death over and over and over again from many different angles through the testimony of many different witnesses. And so part of what they will be ascertaining, which would lead to the verdict that we are about to hear, is whether what Officer Chauvin did was necessary and reasonable under the circumstances.
Right, and his attorney, the defense attorney, was putting out the strategy that actually it wasn't Derek Chauvin's actions, it was the fact that George Floyd had taken drugs and that he had a poor state of health. What do you think of that defense? And does that explain, or would that be a reasonable explanation for what happened?
I don't find that argument to be persuasive, particularly in light of the medical testimony by the pulmonologist who spoke about how the applied pressure, the amount of pressure, Chauvin's full weight on the neck of George Floyd, cutting off his airways, was the cause of death. The fact that he had drugs in his system, the fact that he may have been under the influence of drugs, is not what rendered him lifeless on the pavement. He was alive prior to the application of Chauvin's knee to his neck. And so that argument defies common sense. Chauvin's conduct is the but-for causation of George Floyd's death. And I think that common sense reality will feature prominently in their deliberations.
One last tactic used by Chauvin's lawyer was to try and get a mistrial based on the fact that the jury may well have been influenced by all the media coverage surrounding the case. In the interests of a fair trial, given that there was so much publicity around this case, how can we be sure that the jury hadn't been influenced against Derek Chauvin?
Well, I also thought it was curious that the judge ruled the way he did in declining to sequester the jurors. I believe the jurors were, during the OJ trial, were sequestered. They were kept away during the entire duration of the trial from any media coverage in a hotel where they were only allowed to interact with one another. And I think that would have been appropriate here given the scale of media coverage of this particular trial. But I also think that the comments made by protesters, by those who are seeking justice for this torturous death, is not going to influence the jury. What is going to influence the jury is the information that they've heard over these weeks. And I don't think that a mistrial will be any more successful for the defense than this trial will be.